So that leaves me with the question, why? Why was that part of the story to begin with? Why did we learn about her being tortured if we can't do anything about that later on at all? Because I feel that in good storytelling, you tell a story with a purpose. So there's a point to that story, and when I'm looking back at what happened, I only see one point. I could be missing something, of course, but what I'm left with is Belin's story is just a motive to tell a story about how evil Valkorion is. Nothing more. That's it. And to really drive the point home, we're also told that Valkorion killed his own father. And that's not enough for him. He keeps him imprisoned in a holocron for 1,000 years. And for what reason? Just to torment him. And I think maybe if I had not let Valkorion's dad free, we could have used him as a tool against Valkorion in the last fight. But I have a suspicion he would just have been eye candy. The story would have played out as it did anyway, with Belin and the rest of what happened, because that seemed to be essential to the story. Because turns out the holocron isn't that important, and Val destroys it in anger. So we're left with a side story that leaves us nowhere. And so it's still more eye candy. And now on to my second point. Yeah, it took a while to get there. And it's got to do with the throne room, which from the very first time I saw it, I was hoping we would have an awesome fight in this room. It almost started like that, but then it just fizzled out and we woke up in a dream world, and Val was supposedly dead and Mar was dead. And so later on, when I realized that the throne itself could maybe be the source or the anchor of Valkorion's ability to stay as a force ghost in my head, because I was so close to the throne when it happened, and he couldn't leave me, although he tried to trick me into believing he did. So I feel like the throne is the anchor. And then we had a premonition, a foreshadowing with the dream of us entering the throne room and everyone laying there dead. So we knew something bad was going to happen in there, right? No question. I mean, a force user of Sion's caliber trusts her dreams because she's got reason to, right? Now, I know that other classes doesn't have her backstory, but to me it just enforced her reason to believe in her own dream as a premonition, because she's been dreaming. She's had dreams her whole career, and they turn out to be true. So to me that felt like a very strong indication that something was going to happen the moment we either entered the throne room or sat down in that ugly old chair. And it did, of course it did. And that's my problem. Not that it happened, but that we never even once say it out loud, that maybe we shouldn't sit down, that maybe we should destroy the throne, that, guys, be ready, I think this is a trap. Not even once. And we should have felt something in there, all of us. So I mean, I'm not even dragging my feet. I just woke up to the throne, tell Arkan to leave it alone, and then I sit down. Like all my interactions with Valkorion, it never felt quite believable that we never protested harder, that we never tried to get him out of our head, especially Sion with her past. I know Valkorion was different than a regular old force ghost, but it's weird we never talk about that. It's weird. I mean, we talk about not enjoying him being there with Lana, for instance, but it's just on the go, and then we're done with it. No one ever comes up to me and says, I've got a plan how to get rid of him, or do you want to get rid of him, or what can we do? Can we do anything? We all just accept that he's there, and I don't feel like I'm really protesting the throne when I'm talking to him. I definitely feel like there should have been more conversations where I would have been able to say, screw the throne, forget it, I don't want it, but it never happens. And the options I hate even more. There's no frustration, there's no anger, there's nothing. I mean, it's not even any chance to embrace it, if that's what you like. So, since Val is forced upon us, at least give us a chance to vent. So, from the moment Valkorion enters my head, we know that he's gonna, at some point, do something to take over, right? He's not gonna give up power to a nobody, even though he tries to tell me I'm not. He, of course, feels like he's superior to everyone else. And so he's there for a reason. He can't get out, and then he starts to formulate a plan for how to take over my body completely. And that should be so obvious to, I guess, 99.999% of all the players, that eventually he is gonna want your body. There's no doubts about it. And I remember wondering why he hadn't just outright killed Balin. And it's too bad they didn't use that in the story, because in the last sequence in the dream world, Val says he didn't have a plan when he realized he was in our head. And so that's not why he kept Balin alive. But that would have been such a nice twist to the story. He was afraid of her power, so it would not surprise me if he had killed her when he could, when she was a child, because he was afraid of her. But he didn't. So why didn't they use that in the story, that he had all along planned to keep her as a tool? He didn't plan on entering my head. He never knew he would enter the dream world again with me and fight me again. So it was sort of a spur of a moment thing when he grabbed Valin's spirit back on Odessan. He's so happy to brag about his brains, and he never talks about that. So that's the devs failing, I think. They could have implemented that and made it a good part of why she had to die. But my point was, why can't the game acknowledge that we, the players, are not gullible fools? We realized from the first moment that this was going to happen one way or another. You're not ruining a good surprise by letting us vent and talk about it, because entering the dream world once again was a surprise in its own. And by the way, how do you explain that Sion in the real world wakes up Sion in the dream world, which happened to have Valkorion's body in the dream world? Why would she even need his body? And then herself as Valkorion wakes up herself in the real world, or maybe I should say gets her to fall deeper asleep. I don't know. She enters the dream world as herself, and she's still asleep in the real world. Mind blown. It's a fun little story to wrap my head around. Alright, so to my last point. And that's the way they told the story, the same story for every class. Because if it's not clear to any of you that watched my Let's Play, or anyone that's unfamiliar with the whole concept, the first, I would say up until level 40-ish, you are playing your own story that only the Inquisitor has. So then the Jedi has his or her story, the smuggler has a story, and so on. So then your character gets to shine with their personalities, right? And so Sion was this sassy assassin. And I had so much fun being the sarcastic little Togruta slave running around, not watching who she was talking to or even caring. So everyone has got their own idea of how their character is. My point is that when they decided to release expansions that had us all enjoy the same story, they did that probably because it was cheaper to make one story instead of 8, and then they could make it awesome. And I think they did. I really love the story, so I got no complaints about the story itself. But looking back at my first 40-ish episodes, I see another Sion. She was more fun, she was more sarcastic, she had her own story that made her unique. And that's not to say I never felt some of that in these expansions, but they toned down the answers we could give to in any conversation, because they knew that people of different personalities would have the same choices in the dialogues. So sometimes I felt like Sion was more serious than I had expected. Sometimes I felt like she was too kind, and sometimes I felt like she was a bit too military leader. And I get why, but looking back I see that, for instance, here's a little snippet of 4 characters I made just to show you their personality coming through in a short sentence.
I don't take orders from anybody.
I will face down all darkness in the galaxy.
The best way to win is by not fighting.
I'm a soldier. I'll get the job done.
And since this game definitely isn't high on my hate list, I don't want to end on a low. So I want to mention something that I find very elegantly done.
If you were a Turian, I'd be complimenting your waist or your fringe. So, your hair looks good, and your waist is very supportive.
And that's Vaylin. Because, yeah, she doesn't look quite like the rest of us females in the galaxy. She doesn't have the same small waist as the rest of us, and I feel like it fits her hips. It's more a natural look than the rest of us has. And when I saw her the first time, I immediately noticed. So yay for that. Alright, I'm gonna wrap up this episode here, and I'll leave you with the rest of the classes in this game. So it's up to you to decide if you feel like they've got some personality or not. Thanks for watching. Take care.
Defy me and it will end badly.
This should be interesting.
I'm always a professional.
I suppose I can lower myself to do this.